In the peaceful village of Agi, where the women walked with their heads bowed, voices silenced, and the men ruled as suited them and their desires, something strange began to happen. Agi was like many other Yoruba villages. The men spoke loudly, made decisions, and controlled the homes. The women, on the other hand, knew their place. They kept quiet, serving their husbands, never daring to speak, and told to endure the mistreatments with patience. But one morning, that silence was broken in a way no one expected. Ajoke, a kind and gentle woman, was the first to hear it. She was the wife of the Bale, the village chief. That day, she had woken early to prepare her husband's meal. Her hands moved slowly, her heart heavy with thoughts of her husband's affairs. She had known for years that he had been with other women, but she never spoke about it. Who was she to question the Bale? As she bent to fetch water from the pot, a strange voice filled the room. It was soft at first, almost a whisper. Ajoke looked around but saw no one. Then she heard it again, clearer this time. "Why do you suffer in silence, Ajoke? Why do you let him shame you?" Her heart pounded in her chest. She was alone, but the voice seemed to come from inside her. She froze, confused. The voice spoke again, but this time it sounded closer, like it came from her body, from her own vagina. "You deserve better," the voice said, louder now. "Why should he treat you like this?" Ajoke gasped, her eyes wide with shock. She looked down at herself, terrified. What was happening? She covered her mouth, trembling, but the voice didn't stop. "I will no longer be silent," it said. "I will speak the truth he hides." Ajoke ran to her neighbor's house, shaking with fear. She told Moreo what had happened, but before she could finish, Moreo began to cry. "It happened to me too," Moreo said, her voice shaking. "I thought I was cursed. My vagina spoke to me last night. It told me everything my husband did in secret." Soon the whole village knew. Women everywhere were hearing the same thing. Their vaginas began to talk, revealing the secrets their men had hidden for years. Husbands' betrayals, their lies, and the shame they forced upon their wives. All of it came out through the women's bodies. The men of Agi were terrified. They could not control what was happening. Some tried to silence their wives, but the vaginas would not be silenced. The truth poured out like water from a broken calabash. One night, the Bale called a village meeting. He stood tall, his voice booming across the village square. "This madness must stop," he shouted. "What kind of curse is this that has come upon our women? We are men. We are the rulers of this land." But as he spoke, Ajoke stood up, her face calm but strong. "We are not cursed," she said. "We have been silent for too long, but no more. Our bodies will no longer carry your secrets." The women of Agi stood with her, their voices rising in unity. The men could only watch as their world, once built on silence and control, began to crumble. From that day on, the women spoke freely. The village changed. Men began to listen, and the balance of power shifted. The story of Agi spread far and wide. Some called it a miracle, others a curse. But the women knew the truth. They had found their voice, not through words alone, but through the very parts of themselves that had once been silenced. And so, the village of Agi was never the same again. As the days passed, the men of Agi began to grow cautious. The once confident and boastful men, who had lived without fear of being caught in their lies and betrayals, now walked on edge. They knew that every secret they held, every lie, every hidden affair, could be exposed, not just by their wives but by any woman in their family. The village, once ruled by men against silent women, had turned into a place where the truth was no longer buried. One day, something happened that shocked the village. Alani, a man known for his wealth and influence, committed an unforgivable crime. He feared that his wife's private part may expose him, and so he killed his wife Tenny. Alani, fearing that her vagina would reveal his secret, buried her body deep in the forest, hoping that with her death the truth would die too. But what Alani did not know was that in the village of Agi, no secret could stay hidden. A week after her death, the unimaginable happened. As Alani's daughter Risi sat quietly at home, a strange voice echoed through the room. "My father killed my mother," Risi's vagina said, clear as day. Alani's heart stopped when he heard it. He rushed to silence his daughter, but it was too late. The entire family heard it. The truth spilled from Risi's body: how her father had struck Tenny in a fit of rage, how he had dragged her lifeless body into the forest, and how he had buried her with his bare hands. The villagers gathered quickly, their faces filled with shock and anger. Alani had nowhere to run. His crime, once hidden in the shadows, was now spoken aloud for everyone to hear. The ballet called for a swift judgment. In a land where the truth could no longer be hidden, there was no place for a man like Alani. He was banished from the village and sent into the evil forest, a place where only the wicked and the cursed dared to go. Alone and stripped of his power, Alani disappeared into the darkness, never to be seen again. From that day forward, the men of Agi knew that there was no place to hide. No lie could be covered, no sin could be buried. The truth would find its way out, through the vagina of any woman, whether young or old. Agi began to change. The men who once lied, cheated, and disrespected their wives began to walk the path of truth. No one wanted to be the man pointed at for bad news. No one wanted to be the one whispered about in the marketplace, known for shame and dishonor. But the villagers always wondered, how did this strange gift come to be? One night, as the women gathered under the moon, an old storyteller, Aya Olahan, shared a tale that had been passed down for generations. She spoke of a woman who had lived long ago, a woman named Abikua, who had suffered terribly at the hands of her husband. He had betrayed her, beaten her, and silenced her. Abikua had been a good woman, but her heart was broken by the cruelty of the man she loved. In her final days, Abikua had gone to the river and made a sacrifice, pleading for justice, not for herself, but for the women who would come after her. She begged God to give women a voice that could not be silenced, a voice that would speak the truth even when they could not. Abikua dreamt that her wish would be granted, but it would take time, many years, even a century. But when the time was right, her sacrifice would bear fruit, and the women of Agi would no longer live in fear. Now, as the villagers listened to the tale, they realized that the time had come. Abikua's sacrifice had been fulfilled. Her suffering had paved the way for the freedom of the women of Agi. Though it took a century, her voice, carried by the women of the village, finally set them free. The story of the talking vaginas spread beyond Agi, and the village became known far and wide. But the people of Agi knew that their peace had come at a price, a sacrifice made long ago by a woman whose courage had changed their lives forever.